My name is Andrew Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. 5 years ago, my brother Jason kicked me out of our family home based on lies his wife Melissa fabricated about me. He chose her word over our 29 years of brotherhood without a second thought. Now, life has come full circle in the most ironic way possible. They've lost everything: their jobs, their home, their savings, and guess who they came crawling back to? That's right, they showed up at MY doorstep, asking to move into MY house. Before I tell you what happened when they appeared on my porch, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories about family drama and unexpected karma, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Growing up in small-town Nebraska, Jason and I shared the typical love-hate relationship of brothers born 3 years apart. Our modest 2-bedroom house meant we shared not just a bedroom but practically everything else. Despite our occasional fights, Jason was always the protective older brother. When neighborhood kids teased me about my glasses in 4th grade, Jason, then in 7th grade, confronted them and made sure they never bothered me again. "Nobody messes with my little brother except me," he'd say, ruffling my hair roughly before cracking a smile that made everything okay. Our parents worked hard, Dad as a mechanic at the local garage and Mom as a receptionist at the medical clinic. We weren't rich by any means, but we had what we needed and our home was full of laughter. Every Friday night was game night, a Mitchell family tradition that Jason took very seriously. He hated losing, especially to me, but those nights around the kitchen table playing Monopoly or Scrabble are some of my fondest memories. Everything changed when I was 14 and Jason was 17. Our parents sat us down one evening after dinner, their faces solemn. "Boys, your mother and I have decided to get a divorce," Dad said, his voice cracking slightly. "The details aren't important now, but the aftermath is." While our parents tried to keep things civil, the tension in the house became unbearable. Jason and I retreated to our shared room more often, finding solace in each other's company. We'd stay up late talking about everything and nothing, processing our new reality together. "It's just you and me now, Andy," Jason said one night as we lay in our twin beds in the darkness. "We've got to stick together." And we did. When Mom moved into an apartment across town, and we split our time between 2 homes, Jason made sure we were always on the same schedule. When Dad started dating again, Jason was the one who helped me process my complicated feelings about it. We became more than brothers. We were allies in the changing landscape of our family. After high school, Jason went to State University while I finished my junior and senior years. Every Sunday, he'd call from his dorm room, checking in and giving me advice about college applications. When my turn came, I followed him to the same school, and during my freshman year, we decided to move into an off-campus apartment together to save money. Those college years strengthened our bond even further. We both worked part-time jobs, Jason at a local restaurant and me at the campus bookstore, while maintaining decent grades. Money was tight, but we made it work. We established our own tradition of Sunday dinners, a simple affair of whatever we could afford, but it was our time to catch up and support each other. "No matter how busy we get, Sundays are sacred," Jason would say, refusing to make other plans even when his friends invited him out. Then, during Jason's senior year, everything changed again. He met Melissa at a party thrown by mutual friends. I remember the moment clearly. I was refilling my drink in the kitchen when Jason burst in, his eyes wide with excitement. "Andy, you've got to meet this girl," he said, grabbing my arm. "She's amazing." Melissa was undeniably attractive with her long dark hair and bright smile. She was a junior studying business, ambitious and charismatic. I watched my usually confident brother stumble over his words as he introduced us, and I was happy for him. My first impression of Melissa was positive. She asked me questions about myself and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "Your brother talks about you all the time," she said warmly. "It's so refreshing to see such a close sibling relationship." Their romance progressed quickly. Within weeks, Jason was spending most of his free time with Melissa. Our Sunday dinners became Sunday brunches so he could spend the evening with her. I understood. He was in love, and I was happy for him. But looking back, I can see how our dynamic began shifting almost immediately. Melissa's influence on Jason was subtle at first. She'd make comments about how unusual it was for grown brothers to be so close. "It's sweet," she'd say. "But don't you think it's time you both branched out more?" She'd suggest that Jason was babysitting me, implying I was dependent on him in a way that wasn't healthy. Small things started happening that should have been warning signs. When Jason would step away, Melissa would make what she called jokes that felt more like jabs. "Jason says you've never had a serious girlfriend. Is it because you're saving yourself for someone who'll never come along, or because you're afraid of being compared to your brother?" She'd laugh afterward, touching my arm as if to signal it was all in good fun. I brushed these comments off, not wanting to create tension. After all, Jason was happier than I'd ever seen him. But then came the complaints about our Sunday tradition. "Every single week? Don't you think that's a bit much?" she'd say when Jason mentioned our plans. Families I know see each other on holidays, not every 7 days like clockwork. Jason defended our tradition at first, but gradually, Sundays became less sacred. We'd reschedule, or shorten our time together, or Melissa would join us, changing the dynamic completely. Around this time, small items began disappearing when Melissa was around. A $20 bill from my wallet that I could have sworn I'd left on my dresser, a pair of sunglasses I'd received as a birthday gift, a textbook I needed for an important exam. When I mentioned these things to Jason, he suggested I was becoming forgetful from studying too hard. My friends noticed changes before I fully admitted them to myself. My roommate Tyler pulled me aside after Melissa and Jason left our apartment one evening. "Is it just me, or does she seem to be driving a wedge between you two?" he asked cautiously. "She makes him happy," I defended, though a knot formed in my stomach. "Maybe," Tyler said, "but she also makes these little digs at you that Jason doesn't seem to notice. Just keep your eyes open, man." I dismissed Tyler's concerns and those of other friends who expressed similar sentiments. Jason was my brother, my best friend. Our bond couldn't be broken by someone he just met, I thought. Besides, questioning his choice in partners would only create unnecessary conflict. How wrong I was. The first incident I couldn't ignore happened about 6 months into their relationship. Jason discovered $60 missing from his wallet after Melissa had spent the day at our apartment. When he mentioned it casually over dinner, Melissa's expression shifted subtly. "Didn't Andrew borrow some cash from you yesterday?" she asked, her voice innocent. "I thought I overheard you two talking about it in the kitchen." Jason looked at me questioningly. "Did you, Andy?" "It's fine if you did, I just don't remember." "No," I said firmly. "I didn't borrow any money from you." Melissa shrugged. "My mistake. I must have misheard." The moment passed, but I caught the slight doubt in Jason's eyes. It was brief, but it was there, the first crack in our foundation of trust. Similar incidents followed. For Jason's birthday, I saved up to buy him a vintage vinyl record he'd wanted for years. I wrapped it carefully and left it on the kitchen counter the morning of his birthday before heading to an early class. When I returned that evening for his small party, Jason thanked me for the thought but mentioned the record was badly scratched. "It's the thought that counts," he said kindly. "But maybe check condition better next time." I was confused. I tested the record in the store before buying it. When I examined it later, it indeed had several deep scratches that hadn't been there before. Melissa had been the only one home during the day. When I tried to explain this to Jason in private, he became defensive. "Are you seriously suggesting Melissa damaged your gift on purpose? Why would she do that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But the record was perfect when I bought it." "Maybe you didn't check it as carefully as you thought," Jason said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. After Jason proposed to Melissa about a year into their relationship, the incidents escalated. Melissa began telling Jason that I made uncomfortable comments when we were alone. "Nothing serious," she'd say. "Just little remarks that make me feel awkward." I didn't want to say anything, but since we're going to be family, Jason confronted me about it one evening. Melissa says you've been making her uncomfortable with some comments. What's going on? What comments? I asked, genuinely confused. I barely talk to her when you're not around. She says you make little jokes about how she's not good enough for me, or how she won't last. His expression was stern. That's not cool, Andy. I never said anything like that. I insisted. Ever. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, maybe you don't realize how your comments come across. Just be more thoughtful around her, okay? The wedding planning became another battleground. Melissa excluded me from all preparations despite Jason's initial insistence that I be his best man. She told relatives I had objected to their relationship from the beginning, creating a narrative where I was the disapproving brother trying to sabotage their happiness. Your brother just doesn't want to see you happy, I overheard her telling Jason one night. He's always been dependent on you, and he's afraid of losing his safety net. That's not true, Jason replied, but his defense was half-hearted. The tension culminated in our first major argument when Jason confronted me about my negativity toward the wedding. Why can't you just be happy for me? He demanded, his voice rising. Everyone notices how you act around Melissa. How I act? Jason, I've been nothing but supportive, I countered. She's the one spreading lies about me to everyone who'll listen. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about, he said, throwing his hands up. You always blame her for everything. Despite the growing rift, I attempted to repair our relationship. I made extra efforts to compliment Melissa, to engage in wedding discussions when permitted, to show enthusiasm for their future together. But it was like swimming against a current that grew stronger by the day. After their wedding, our living situation took a new turn. Our grandparents passed away within months of each other, leaving their modest house to both of us jointly, though Jason, being older and married, was given primary control. We agreed that all three of us would live there while saving money, Jason and Melissa in the master bedroom, me in the smaller second bedroom. It seemed like a practical arrangement, but it quickly became uncomfortable. Melissa began rearranging the house without consulting me, moving furniture that had been in our family for generations into storage to make room for new pieces she preferred. When I objected to some family photos being removed from the living room, she told Jason I was resistant to change and trying to keep the house as a shrine to the past. My possessions began to be moved or damaged. My laptop, accidentally, fell off the desk when Melissa was cleaning. My framed college diploma somehow dropped from the wall, the glass shattering. My grandfather's chess set, which he had taught both Jason and me to play on, disappeared entirely, with Melissa suggesting I might have left it somewhere and forgotten. I began spending more time in my room, emerging only when necessary. The home that should have been partly mine had become hostile territory. Even the kitchen, once a place of warmth and family gatherings, felt unwelcoming when Melissa was present. She'd make comments about my eating habits or leave me out when preparing meals for herself and Jason. The social manipulation extended beyond our home. Melissa began telling mutual friends that I was struggling with depression and possibly other mental health issues. We're really worried about Andrew, she'd say with practiced concern. He barely leaves his room, and when he does, he seems so angry. Jason's doing his best to help him, but you know how it is when someone won't admit they need help. At family gatherings, she'd create situations where I appeared difficult or antisocial. She'd interrupt when I was speaking to relatives, redirect conversations when I joined groups, and later comment on how I kept to myself the whole time. My dating life suffered as well. I had been seeing a woman named Rachel for several months, our relationship progressing well until she suddenly became distant. When we finally talked, she admitted Melissa had told her I had commitment issues and a history of leading women on. She said she was just looking out for me as a friend, Rachel explained uncomfortably. She mentioned several ex-girlfriends who you'd apparently hurt badly. These were pure fabrications. I'd had only 2 serious relationships before Rachel, both ending amicably. But the damage was done. Rachel couldn't quite shake the doubts Melissa had planted, and our relationship fizzled soon after. I might never have discovered the extent of Melissa's campaign against me if not for my friend Tyler, who remained loyal despite the rumors. He called me one evening, his voice serious. "Andy, I need to tell you something. I was at Dave and Karen's party last weekend, and Melissa was there without Jason. She was telling people you've been displaying erratic behavior lately, including some kind of outburst where you supposedly threatened her." My blood ran cold. "That never happened, Tyler. Nothing even close to that has happened." "I know, man. That's why I'm calling you. This is getting out of hand." Armed with this knowledge, I tried again to talk to Jason, choosing a moment when Melissa was out with friends. "Jason, we need to talk about what's happening. Melissa is spreading serious lies about me." He immediately stiffened. "Here we go again. Every problem in your life is somehow Melissa's fault. She told people I threatened her, Jason." "That never happened. So you're calling my wife a liar?" His voice rose dangerously. "I'm saying there's a pattern here that you're refusing to see. The only pattern I see is you consistently attacking my relationship because you can't handle not being my priority anymore." He shot back. "Maybe it's time you found your own place, Andy." The conversation devolved from there, with Jason interpreting every point I raised as an attack on Melissa. By the end, we were barely speaking, and the idea of me moving out had been firmly planted. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Our grandfather's watch, a vintage Omega that had been passed down for generations, went missing from Jason's dresser drawer. This wasn't just any possession, it was a family heirloom with both monetary and sentimental value. Our grandfather had worn it every day of his adult life, and before he died, he had specifically mentioned that both Jason and I should take turns wearing it on special occasions. Jason noticed it was missing on a Tuesday evening as he was getting ready for a work dinner. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when he stormed in, face flushed with anger. "Where's Grandpa's watch?" he demanded without preamble. "In your dresser drawer, isn't it? That's where you always keep it." "It's gone, Andy. And I know I had it there yesterday." Before I could respond, Melissa appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned but with something else flickering beneath, something that made my stomach tighten. "Jason, remember what we talked about with the pawn shops?" she said quietly. Jason's eyes widened as he turned back to me. "Have you been gambling again?" "Again? I've never had a gambling problem, Jason. What are you talking about?" Melissa stepped forward, placing a hand on Jason's arm. "Honey, remember those credit card statements we found in the mail a few months ago? The charges at the casino?" This was news to me. "What credit card statements? I don't even have a credit card in this house's address." "Stop lying," Jason said, his voice low and dangerous. "The watch is missing, and you're the only other person with access to our bedroom. I haven't been in your bedroom in weeks. And I would never take Grandpa's watch." The argument escalated, with Jason growing increasingly convinced of my guilt while I became more frustrated by his willingness to believe these fabrications. Melissa stood by, occasionally adding a comment that only fueled Jason's suspicions. The next morning, I returned from my morning run to find Melissa waiting for me in the living room, a piece of paper in her hand and a solemn expression on her face. "Jason's already left for work," she said. "But I need to talk to you about something I found." She handed me the paper, a receipt from a local pawn shop dated the previous day. My name was clearly written on it, along with an item description that matched the watch and a sum of $800. "I found this in your desk drawer when I was looking for a stapler," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Andrew, if you're having money problems, there are better ways to handle it than pawning family heirlooms." I stared at the receipt, my mind racing. "This is fake. I never went to this pawn shop. I never took the watch. The receipt has your signature, Andrew." She pointed to a scrawled signature at the bottom that bore a passing resemblance to mine, though any close inspection would reveal it as a forgery. "This is forged," I insisted. "I was at work all day yesterday. My boss and coworkers can confirm that." Melissa shrugged. Maybe you went during your lunch break. All I know is what the evidence shows. When Jason came home that evening, he confronted me with the receipt, his face hard with betrayal. Melissa stood behind him, her expression a perfect mask of disappointment and concern. I didn't take the watch, Jason. I didn't pawn anything. That receipt is fake. Your signature is right there, he shouted. Stop lying to my face. It's not my signature. Someone forged it. I was shouting too now, desperation making my voice crack. Call the pawn shop. Ask them to describe who came in. It wasn't me. I already called, he said coldly. They described a man matching your description exactly. Of course they did. I realized then how thoroughly Melissa had planned this. Jason, think about this. Why would I take the watch? I'm not in financial trouble. I have a steady job. And that watch means as much to me as it does to you. I don't know why you did it, he said, shaking his head. Maybe you're in some kind of trouble you're not telling me about. Maybe it's something else. But I know you did it. I didn't, I insisted, my voice dropping to a plea. Jason, we've been brothers for 29 years. You know me. I wouldn't do this. I thought I knew you, he said, the finality in his voice cutting deeper than his anger had. But Melissa's been right about you all along. You've changed. The ultimatum came next: admit to taking the watch and seek help for my problems, or move out. I refused to confess to something I hadn't done, so the decision was made. I had 48 hours to pack my things and leave. Those 2 days were a blur of packing and desperate attempts to make Jason see reason. Melissa supervised as I packed, supposedly to make sure none of their belongings accidentally made it into my boxes. Items I knew I owned somehow became disputed property. My collection of vinyl records, half of them given to me by Jason himself over the years, was reduced by a third as Melissa claimed Jason had always wanted certain albums. The worst moment came on the second day. While Melissa was taking a shower, I decided to search their bedroom in a last-ditch effort to find the watch. I knew it was risky, but I was beyond caring at that point. After 15 minutes of careful searching, I found it, tucked into a jewelry box in Melissa's drawer, hidden beneath some scarves. My hands shaking, I took the watch and went to find Jason, who was in the garage organizing some tools. Jason, I said, my voice tight with emotion. Look what I just found in Melissa's jewelry box. He turned, saw the watch in my hand, and his expression darkened. You went through our bedroom? And now you're trying to plant the watch to frame Melissa? No! I found it in her drawer, hidden under some scarves. She took it, Jason. She's been setting me up this whole time. Get out, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Get your things and get out of my house now. Not tomorrow. Now. Jason, please. Now! He roared, stepping toward me with such fury that I backed away. And leave the watch. It's not yours. I placed the watch on the workbench, a final surrender. There was no winning this battle. Melissa had succeeded in completely turning my brother against me. I finished packing in silence, loading my car with what remained of my possessions, a fraction of what I'd owned before moving into the family home. As I made my final trip to the car, neighbors watched from their driveways and windows, curious about the sudden departure. Jason stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face impassive. Don't contact us, he said as I approached to say goodbye. I don't want to hear from you until you're ready to be honest and get help. This is a mistake, Jason, I said quietly. Someday you'll realize that. He didn't respond, just closed the door as I turned to walk away. I took one last look at the house that should have been half mine, the house where our grandparents had hosted Christmas dinners and summer barbecues, where Jason and I had once planned to raise our families in proximity so our children could be as close as we had been. Now it represented nothing but betrayal and loss. As I drove away, I had no specific destination in mind. All I knew was that my brother, my best friend, my ally through our parents' divorce and every challenge since, was now a stranger to me, and the life I had known was over. The first week after the eviction, I stayed at a budget motel on the outskirts of town, cycling between anger, hurt, and disbelief. Each night, I'd reach for my phone to call Jason, then remember his final words and set it aside. During the day, I went to work, smiled through meetings, and pretended everything was normal, while inside I was crumbling. By the end of that week, my savings dwindling fast from the motel costs, I swallowed my pride and called Tyler. "I need a place to stay," I admitted when he answered. "Just for a little while until I figure things out." Tyler didn't hesitate. "My couch is yours for as long as you need it, man." He wasn't the only friend who stepped up. My college roommate Craig offered his spare room for a few weeks while he was away on a business trip. My coworker Lisa connected me with her brother who had an apartment for rent and was willing to be flexible with the deposit. During those transitional months, I learned who my true friends were. And it wasn't always who I expected. People I'd considered casual acquaintances showed up with furniture when they heard I was starting from scratch. A former girlfriend I'd remained friendly with helped me navigate the legal aspects of being forced from a house I'd partly owned. I consulted with a lawyer about the house situation. The news wasn't good. "You do have legal rights to the property," he explained. "But fighting this in court would be expensive and could drag on for years. And given that your brother is living there with his wife, the court might favor their occupancy rights. So basically, I'm screwed," I summarized flatly. "Not necessarily. We could potentially negotiate a buyout where your brother purchases your share of the house." I considered this option but ultimately decided against pursuing it immediately. As angry as I was, some part of me still hoped for eventual reconciliation. Making legal demands seemed like burning the last bridge between us. Instead, I focused on starting over. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a city about 40 minutes away, close enough to keep my job, far enough to avoid running into Jason or Melissa. The apartment was nothing special: beige walls, worn carpet, appliances from the previous decade. But it was mine, a space where no one could manipulate or control me. Those early days of independence were lonely. I'd never lived completely alone before, and the silence was sometimes overwhelming. I'd catch myself talking out loud just to hear a human voice. Weekends stretched endlessly without the automatic social life that comes with living with others. 2 months after moving, I finally took my friend Lisa's advice and started therapy. My first session was awkward. I'd always prided myself on handling my own problems, but gradually I came to value the weekly hour where I could process everything without judgment. "What you experienced was a form of gaslighting," my therapist explained during one session. "Melissa systematically undermined your reality and convinced your brother to do the same. That's a form of psychological abuse. I still can't believe Jason couldn't see through it," I said, the hurt still raw. "We grew up together. How could he just choose her version of me over everything he knew to be true? People are vulnerable to manipulation when it comes from someone they trust and love," she replied. "And it likely didn't happen all at once. It was probably gradual enough that he didn't notice the shifting ground beneath him. These insights didn't immediately heal the wound, but they helped me understand what had happened and, more importantly, that it wasn't my fault." The holiday season arrived, my first without family. Thanksgiving loomed like a specter on the calendar. When Lisa invited me to join her family's celebration, I almost declined, not wanting to intrude. But the alternative, a frozen dinner in my empty apartment, was too depressing to contemplate. Lisa's family welcomed me warmly, making space at their table without making me feel like a charity case. As we passed dishes around and shared stories, I felt a twinge of something I hadn't experienced in months: belonging. It wasn't the same as family, but it was something. After dinner, Lisa's father pulled me aside. "Lisa told us a bit about your situation," he said. "I want you to know, holidays can be rough when family relationships change. Our door is always open to you." I thanked him, fighting back unexpected tears. That night, I created a new entry in my phone contacts. "Chosen family. Lisa was the first name I added. When Christmas approached, I decided to create my own traditions rather than attempting to replicate what I'd lost. I volunteered at a local shelter on Christmas Eve, signed up for a community hike on Christmas Day, and hosted a small gathering for other holiday orphans on New Year's Eve. None of it erased the absence of Jason, but it filled the void with new connections and experiences. Professionally, those months became a period of unexpected growth. Without the constant drama at home, I channeled my energy into work. I volunteered for projects others avoided, stayed late to learn new skills, and built a reputation as someone reliable and innovative. 8 months after moving, I received my first promotion at the marketing firm where I worked. My boss, Thomas, called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. "Andrew, your work these past months hasn't gone unnoticed," he said. "We'd like to offer you the senior account manager position." The promotion came with a substantial raise and more responsibility. As I thanked Thomas, he added, "I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but I've been impressed by your resilience this year. Lisa mentioned you've been through some personal challenges. The way you've handled yourself speaks volumes about your character." Thomas became more than a boss, he became a mentor, offering career guidance and occasionally personal advice as well. When I mentioned wanting to expand my professional skills, he suggested night classes and adjusted my schedule to accommodate them. "Invest in yourself now," he advised. "Build the foundation for the life you want, not the one you left behind." I took his words to heart, enrolling in digital marketing certification courses and a financial management class. The latter proved particularly valuable as I began rebuilding my finances. My therapist had suggested creating tangible goals as part of my healing process, so I established a 5-year plan. At the top of the list, homeownership. After losing my share of the family house, I was determined to create a home that was unquestionably mine. I opened a dedicated savings account, setting up automatic transfers with each paycheck. I cut expenses where possible, choosing a cheaper phone plan, learning to cook instead of ordering takeout, finding free entertainment options in my new city. Every dollar saved brought me closer to independence. My personal life gradually expanded beyond work and classes. I joined a community basketball league, reconnecting with a sport I'd loved in high school. The weekly games provided exercise, social interaction, and a healthy outlet for lingering anger and frustration. Through the league, I met Miguel, who quickly became a close friend. Unlike those who had known me during the Melissa situation, Miguel had no preconceived notions about me. Our friendship developed organically, based on shared interests and compatible personalities rather than history or obligation. Miguel introduced me to his friend group, and slowly my social circle expanded. We went hiking on weekends, attended local concerts, and had regular game nights that reminded me of childhood Fridays with my family, though these games involved more adult beverages and colorful language. Dating again was challenging. My experience with Melissa had left me wary of manipulation and deceit, making it difficult to trust new people. My first few attempts at dating were disasters. I either kept potential partners at arm's length or subjected them to unconscious tests of character. My therapist helped me recognize these patterns. "You're protecting yourself from being hurt again," she observed. "But you're also preventing authentic connections." Gradually, I learned to be more open while maintaining healthy boundaries. I began seeing a woman named Ellie, taking things slowly and communicating honestly about my trust issues. She appreciated my candor, sharing some of her own past relationship challenges. Though our relationship eventually ended amicably due to different life goals, it restored my faith that genuine connections were still possible. As my 3rd anniversary of independence approached, an unexpected opportunity arose at work. Our firm had landed a major client, and Thomas recommended me to lead the account team. "It's a big responsibility," he warned, "but I believe you're ready." The project consumed my life for months, with late nights and working weekends. But when we successfully launched the campaign to rave reviews from the client, the professional satisfaction was unmatched by anything I'd experienced before. The success brought another promotion and bonus, pushing my house fund tantalizingly close to my goal. 3 years and 2 months after being kicked out of my family home, I began searching for a place of my own. The house hunting process was both exciting and intimidating. I visited dozens of properties, learning about inspection contingencies, mortgage rates, and property taxes along the way. When I finally found the one, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman with a yard large enough for weekend barbecues, I submitted an offer the same day. The negotiations were tense, with multiple counteroffers, but eventually we reached an agreement. Sitting in the closing attorney's office, signing document after document, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced before. This achievement was entirely mine, earned through hard work, discipline, and resilience. The day I received the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. I had done it. Despite losing my brother, my home, and temporarily my sense of self, I had rebuilt my life piece by piece. That evening, I hosted an impromptu housewarming with my closest friends. As we toasted with champagne in plastic cups amid stacks of moving boxes, Lisa raised her glass. "To Andrew," she said, "who taught us all what it means to rise from the ashes." As my friends echoed the toast, I looked around at the faces of my chosen family, people who had supported me, believed in me, and helped me rebuild. The house around us wasn't just a financial investment. It was tangible proof that I had survived and thrived. Later that night, after everyone had left, I unpacked a small box I'd kept closed for 3 years. Inside were the few family photos I'd managed to take when leaving Jason's house. I selected one, Jason and me at my college graduation, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning widely, and placed it on a shelf. Despite everything, he was still my brother. And this house, my house, had room for that memory. It was a Saturday afternoon in April, almost 5 years since I'd last spoken to Jason. I was in the backyard, hands deep in garden soil as I planted tomatoes for the summer. The unseasonably warm weather had motivated me to get an early start on my vegetable garden, a hobby I'd developed the previous year. The doorbell rang, an unexpected intrusion on my peaceful weekend. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I made my way through the house, assuming it was probably a package delivery or perhaps Miguel dropping by unannounced as he occasionally did. When I opened the door, time seemed to freeze. Standing on my porch were Jason and Melissa, looking nothing like the confident, put-together couple I remembered. Jason's face was gaunt, his clothes wrinkled and worn. Melissa stood slightly behind him, her once perfect appearance now disheveled, her designer clothes replaced by a plain t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. "Andy," Jason said, his voice hoarse. We didn't know where else to go. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over me, shock, anger, vindication, concern, and a deep-seated hurt that 5 years hadn't fully healed. I said nothing, my brain struggling to process the reality of my brother standing on my doorstep after all this time. "Can we come in?" he asked, the confidence that had once defined him completely absent. "Just to talk. Please." Part of me wanted to slam the door, to let them feel a fraction of the rejection I had experienced. But another part, the part that still remembered the brother who had protected me from bullies and supported me through our parents' divorce, couldn't turn him away without at least hearing what he had to say. "Fine," I said finally, stepping aside. "You can come in." They entered tentatively, looking around at my home with expressions I couldn't quite read. Pride? Envy? Desperation? I led them to the living room, gesturing toward the sofa while I took the armchair opposite. "Nice place," Jason offered awkwardly. "It's really nice." "Thank you," I replied stiffly. "What are you doing here, Jason?" He exchanged a glance with Melissa before responding. "We're in a bad situation, Andy. Really bad." Over the next 20 minutes, they unfolded a story of progressive downfall. Jason had lost his job during the economic downturn 18 months earlier, a victim of company-wide layoffs. He'd been confident about finding another position quickly, but weeks turned into months with only a few interviews and no offers. I was overqualified for entry-level positions but underqualified for senior roles, he explained. And employers see a gap in employment as a red flag. Meanwhile, Melissa had continued spending as if nothing had changed. Credit card debt mounted as she maintained their lifestyle, assuring Jason that he'd find work soon and they'd catch up on payments. I just didn't want people to know we were struggling, she interjected, the first time she'd spoken since arriving. It was embarrassing. When their savings ran out, they began missing mortgage payments. The family home, our grandparents' house, had been refinanced multiple times over the years to cover expenses and debt consolidation. They now owed far more than the property was worth. We tried to negotiate with the bank, Jason continued, but we were already underwater on the mortgage. When foreclosure proceedings started, we didn't have any options left. They'd filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago, surrendering the house and their vehicle as part of the settlement. Jason had finally found work stocking shelves at a grocery store, a far cry from his previous management position, while Melissa picked up occasional shifts at a local coffee shop. We were staying with friends for a while, Jason said, his voice dropping. But we've worn out our welcome everywhere. For the past 2 weeks, we've been living in our car. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine desperation there, along with something else, shame. I know we have no right to ask you for anything, he continued, especially after everything. But we didn't know where else to turn. And then came the audacious request I'd been anticipating since they walked through my door. We were hoping we could stay here, just until we get back on our feet, Jason said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. Just temporarily. Melissa, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. You have so much space here for just one person, she observed, glancing around my living room. That spare bedroom upstairs would be perfect. I noticed her eyes lingering on my furnishings, mentally cataloging everything. The flat-screen TV, the comfortable sectional sofa, the artwork on the walls. All representations of the life I'd built without them. It wouldn't be for long, Jason added quickly. Just until we save enough for a deposit on an apartment. 2 months, maybe 3 at most. There was a subtle criticism in their tone, an implication that my success while they struggled was somehow unfair or undeserved. Jason's next comment confirmed this undercurrent. It's just hard to believe, he said, gesturing vaguely at my home. You're doing so well while we lost everything. Life has a strange way of working out, doesn't it? The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I had been the one forced to leave with nowhere to go, while they remained comfortable in the family home. Now our positions were reversed, but with one critical difference. My hardship had been engineered by them, while theirs was largely self-inflicted. I need some time to think about this, I said finally, unwilling to make an immediate decision with so many emotions churning inside me. Of course, Jason said quickly, relief evident in his voice. He'd clearly expected an outright rejection. We completely understand. We can give you our phone number, Melissa offered, then added with a grimace. Though we might not have service much longer if we can't pay the bill. I felt a twinge of sympathy despite myself. Whatever their past actions, the idea of my brother living in a car was deeply troubling. I'll tell you what, I said after a moment's consideration. I'll pay for a week at the Sunset Motel. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe. That will give you somewhere to stay while I think about all this. The relief on their faces was palpable. Thank you, Andy, Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. That's really generous of you. I drove them to the motel, paid for 7 nights in advance, and watched as they carried their few possessions, contained in 2 duffel bags and a backpack, into the room. As I pulled away, the weight of the decision before me settled heavily on my shoulders. They wanted to move into my house, the sanctuary I had created after they destroyed my previous life. The irony was almost too perfect, like something from a movie rather than real life. But this wasn't fiction. This was my brother, once my best friend, now a desperate stranger asking for help I wasn't sure I could or should provide. The drive home from the motel was a blur, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt mentally exhausted. I entered my house, my sanctuary, and immediately felt the weight of what Jason and Melissa were asking. They wanted to enter this space I had created, this life I had built without them, and claim a part of it. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over my carefully tended garden. The tomato plants I'd been setting in the ground before their arrival stood half-planted, a physical representation of how their reappearance had interrupted the life I'd constructed. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning as memories and questions tumbled through my mind. By morning I knew I needed outside perspectives. I called Miguel first, arranging to meet for coffee. His reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "Absolutely not," he said firmly after I explained the situation. "These people destroyed your life once already. Why would you give them the opportunity to do it again?" "He's my brother," I said weakly, though the justification sounded hollow even to my own ears. "A brother who chose his wife's lies over 29 years of knowing you," Miguel countered. "Look, I get that you still care about him. That's who you are, you care about people even when they don't deserve it. But there's a difference between helping someone and setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." The next day, I met Thomas for lunch, seeking the measured wisdom he'd provided throughout our mentor relationship. "This is certainly a complex situation," he said thoughtfully after I'd explained everything. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut is confused," I admitted. "Part of me wants to help Jason because he's family, despite everything. Another part is afraid of letting them into my life again. And a third part, if I'm being completely honest, wants them to suffer the consequences of their actions." Thomas nodded. "All those feelings are valid. The question isn't whether you should feel them, but which ones should guide your actions." "What would you do?" I asked. "I can't answer that," he said. "But I can tell you this. In my experience, the decisions we regret most aren't the ones that didn't work out. They're the ones where we betrayed our own values." That insight stayed with me as I headed to my weekly therapy session that afternoon. My therapist listened attentively as I detailed the unexpected visit and my subsequent confusion. "What worries you most about letting them stay with you?" she asked. "That they'll hurt me again," I answered immediately. "That Melissa will start her manipulations and turn my home into a hostile environment like before." "And what worries you about refusing?" I considered this longer. "That I'm being vindictive. That I'm punishing Jason for past mistakes when he genuinely needs help. That I might regret not trying to repair our relationship when I had the chance." "Both concerns are valid," she acknowledged. "But I'd like you to consider something. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. Whatever you decide, it should be based on what's healthy for you, not what's expected of you." Over the next few days, I began practical research to inform my decision. I ran a background check on Jason and Melissa, discovering they'd been evicted from 2 apartments after the foreclosure. They'd apparently tried staying with various friends and family members, never lasting more than a few weeks at any location. I discreetly checked their social media accounts. Despite claiming financial devastation, Melissa's Instagram showed posts from restaurants and shopping trips as recently as 2 months ago. There were photos of new clothing and accessories with captions like, "Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. #selfcare. Dated during the period Jason claimed they were struggling to make mortgage payments. Most revealing was a call with our cousin Sarah, who had always been close to both Jason and me. I hadn't spoken to her in years, assuming she'd sided with Jason after the split. "Andrew? Is that really you?" she answered, sounding shocked when I identified myself. "It's me, Sarah. How have you been?" After catching up briefly, I cautiously approached the subject of Jason and Melissa. "They stayed with us for 3 weeks last fall," she confirmed. "It was challenging. Melissa constantly complained about our outdated guest room and criticized everything from my cooking to how we parent our kids. When things went missing from my jewelry box, That was the final straw. They took your jewelry? I asked, a familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. I can't prove it was them, she hedged, but my grandmother's pearl earrings disappeared during their stay. When I mentioned it, Melissa suggested our cleaning lady might have taken them. This pattern sounded painfully familiar. Sarah went on to reveal that Jason and Melissa had attempted similar arrangements with other family members and friends, always with similar outcomes. The worst part, Sarah confided, is that we all want to help Jason. We can see he's struggling. But Melissa, she hasn't changed, Andrew. If anything, she's worse. The most disturbing revelation came when I contacted a mutual friend who worked at the bank that had foreclosed on their house. While he couldn't share specific details due to confidentiality, he hinted that the situation was more complicated than simple job loss. Let's just say there were some irregularities with loan applications, he said carefully. Nothing that resulted in criminal charges, but enough that they'll have trouble getting approved for any legitimate loan in the future. With each piece of information, the picture became clearer. Jason and Melissa's current situation wasn't simply bad luck, it was the culmination of poor choices, dishonesty, and refusing to adjust their lifestyle to reality. I spent one sleepless night researching local resources for housing assistance, compiling a list of programs, shelters, and agencies that could potentially help them. If I wasn't going to offer my home, I wanted to at least provide alternatives. Throughout this investigation, I continued wrestling with my own conflicting emotions. The decision weighed on me constantly, while working, while exercising, while attempting to sleep. I found myself standing in my spare bedroom one evening, trying to imagine them living there, occupying my space, being part of my daily life again. The thought filled me with anxiety. This house represented not just financial achievement but emotional healing. It was the place where I had rebuilt myself after they broke me. Could I preserve that healing while inviting back the very people who had caused the damage? After nearly a week of deliberation, I scheduled a consultation with my lawyer to understand potential legal implications of allowing them to stay. His advice was unambiguous. If you do decide to let them stay, treat it like any other tenancy, he recommended. Have a written agreement specifying duration, expectations, and consequences for violations. Without documentation, removing them could become complicated if things go south. He helped me draft a simple agreement that would protect my interests if I decided to move forward, a month-to-month arrangement with specific conditions regarding behavior, financial contribution, and grounds for immediate termination. This isn't just legal protection, he explained. It's boundary setting. Clear expectations benefit everyone. With all this information gathered, I finally felt prepared to make a decision. I wasn't going to let emotion alone guide me, nor would I allow past hurts to dictate my actions. Instead, I would find a middle path, one that honored both my capacity for compassion and my need for self-protection. I texted Jason, asking to meet at a coffee shop the following morning. It was time to give them my answer, an answer that would acknowledge our shared past while protecting the future I had worked so hard to build. The coffee shop I chose was neutral territory, not too close to my home, but comfortable enough for a potentially difficult conversation. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy while still being in a public space. When Jason and Melissa entered, I noticed they'd made efforts with their appearance. Their clothes, while still worn, were clean and pressed. Melissa's hair was neatly styled, reminiscent of her once immaculate presentation. "Thank you for meeting us," Jason said as they sat down. There was cautious hope in his eyes. "And thank you again for the motel. It's been really helpful." I nodded, pushing a folder across the table. "I've done some research on resources that might help your situation." They exchanged confused glances before Jason opened the folder. Inside were printouts of various housing assistance programs, employment services, debt counseling options, and social service agencies. All thoroughly researched and annotated with eligibility requirements and application processes. "There's a transitional housing program on page 3 that has openings," I explained. They provide temporary apartments while connecting residents with job training and financial counseling. I called yesterday, and they can arrange an intake interview this week. Jason's expression shifted from confusion to disappointment as understanding dawned. So, you're not offering to let us stay with you? No, I said firmly but not unkindly. I'm not. Melissa's face hardened. I knew this was a waste of time, she muttered. He's always been selfish. Melissa, Jason warned quietly, though without the conviction he once would have shown. I took a deep breath. I'm willing to help you get back on your feet, but not by having you live in my home. I can pay the security deposit on an apartment if you qualify for one. I can connect you with employment resources. I can even help with groceries while you stabilize. But my home is off limits. Why? Jason asked, genuine hurt in his voice. We're family, Andy. Yes, we are. I agreed. And families should support each other. But families should also respect boundaries. I looked directly at Jason, holding his gaze. 5 years ago, you chose to believe the worst about me without evidence. You threw me out of our family home based on lies. You cut me out of your life completely. Those actions have consequences, Jason. One of those consequences is that I no longer trust either of you in my personal space. That was different. He protested weakly. We thought. You thought what Melissa wanted you to think. I interrupted. And from what I've learned this week, not much has changed. You're still making excuses, still avoiding responsibility, still expecting others to fix your problems. Melissa's expression darkened further. So this is revenge? You're paying us back for what happened? No, I said firmly. This is self-protection. This is me setting healthy boundaries based on past experience. I turned back to Jason. I do care about what happens to you. That's why I've put together these resources. That's why I'm willing to help financially to get you into stable housing. But I won't sacrifice my own well-being in the process. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Jason vacillated between understanding and disappointment, while Melissa cycled through attempts at manipulation, tears, guilt, subtle threats about family loyalty, and finally barely contained anger when these tactics failed. Look, I said finally, the choice is yours. I'm offering real, practical help that addresses the actual problems. You can take it or leave it. Jason stared at the folder for a long moment before nodding slowly. I appreciate the effort you put into this, he said quietly. It's more than most people have done. We parted with an awkward handshake and their promise to call the transitional housing program. As I watched them walk away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness for what our relationship had become, but also pride in maintaining my boundaries despite the pull of familial obligation. The aftermath unfolded gradually. 2 days later, Jason called to say they had the intake interview with the housing program. A week after that, he texted that they'd been accepted and would be moving into a transitional apartment the following Monday. I sent the promised financial assistance directly to the program administrator rather than to Jason and Melissa personally, a precaution my lawyer had suggested. What surprised me most came 3 weeks later, when Jason asked to meet me alone for coffee. Without Melissa's presence, he seemed more like the brother I remembered, still carrying the weight of their circumstances, but with glimmers of his former self. I wanted to thank you properly, he began awkwardly. The program is actually helping. They've got me enrolled in skills training for project management certification. And the financial counseling, well, it's eye-opening. That's good, I said sincerely. I'm glad it's working out. After some small talk, he took a deep breath. I also wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for showing up and asking to stay with you, but for not believing you. The apology I'd once desperately wanted now felt both overdue and insufficient. What changed? I asked. Time. Perspective. He stared into his coffee. And seeing the same patterns repeat with other people. Over the following months, Jason and I established a cautious, limited relationship. We met occasionally for lunch, carefully avoiding certain topics while rediscovering common ground in others. He mentioned that he and Melissa were taking space from each other. Not quite separated but no longer living together, as she'd moved in with a cousin while he remained in the transitional housing. She didn't like the program rules, he explained vaguely when I inquired. The budgeting requirements, the counseling sessions. I wasn't surprised. Melissa's social media, now filled with vague posts about toxic people and those who abandon you in hard times, made it clear she viewed me as the villain in their story. I blocked her accounts after discovering several posts that obviously referenced me, calling me selfish and heartless for not opening my home to family in need. 6 months after their initial appearance on my doorstep, Jason had secured a modest apartment and an entry-level position at a logistics company. During one of our infrequent lunches, he shyly presented me with a small package. "I found this when I was sorting through some storage boxes," he said as I unwrapped it. Inside was our grandfather's chess set. The one that had mysteriously disappeared years ago. Several pieces showed signs of repair, but it was unmistakably the set we had learned to play on as children. "Melissa told me she donated it to a thrift store," Jason said quietly. "I believed her until I found it hidden in a box of her things." The chess set now sits on a shelf in my living room, a complicated symbol of both loss and recovery. Occasionally, when Jason visits, we play a game, cautiously rebuilding a fragment of our former relationship. Our grandparents' house, long since repossessed by the bank, was eventually sold at auction. Jason mentioned the possibility of us pooling resources to buy it back someday, but we both knew it was an unrealistic dream. Too much had happened, too many bridges burned, for us to return to that shared vision of family proximity. The experience with Jason and Melissa taught me lessons I never expected to learn, about resilience, boundaries, and the complex nature of forgiveness. I discovered that setting limits isn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. I learned that helping others doesn't always mean giving them exactly what they ask for, but rather what they truly need. Most importantly, I came to understand that family is both a gift and a choice. The accident of birth creates initial bonds, but maintaining those bonds requires mutual respect and care. When those elements are absent, it's not only acceptable but sometimes necessary to redefine what family means. My chosen family, friends like Miguel and Lisa, mentors like Thomas, colleagues who became confidants, proved more reliable than blood ties in many ways. They supported me without manipulation, respected my boundaries, and celebrated my successes without resentment. This doesn't mean I've abandoned hope for my relationship with Jason. We continue our cautious reconnection, with clear boundaries and modest expectations. Some days I glimpse the brother I once knew and loved. Other days, the gulf between us seems insurmountable. But I've accepted this uncertainty as part of our new reality. As for Melissa, I maintain firm distance. Forgiveness doesn't require vulnerability to those who have proven harmful. I can wish her well without allowing her back into my life. This distinction, between forgiveness and reconciliation, was perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. My home remains my sanctuary, the physical manifestation of my journey from betrayal to self-sufficiency. Each room represents not just financial investment but emotional healing. The spare bedroom that Jason and Melissa coveted has become my home office, a space where I now mentor young professionals facing their own challenges, passing forward the wisdom others shared with me. Looking back at the frightened, hurt young man who drove away from his family home 5 years ago, I barely recognize him. That version of me couldn't imagine the strength, resilience, and wisdom I would develop through adversity. I couldn't foresee the rich life waiting on the other side of betrayal. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd allowed Jason and Melissa to move in. Would they have changed? Would we have reconciled more fully? Or would history have repeated itself, leaving me once again to rebuild from ruins? I'll never know the answer, but I'm at peace with my decision. By maintaining my boundaries while offering practical help, I honored both my capacity for compassion and my need for self-protection. This balance, I've found, is the true meaning of wisdom. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have opened your home to family members who had previously betrayed you, or would you have set firm boundaries like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've faced similar family dilemmas, I'd love to hear how you handled them. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to hear more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it offers some insight or comfort if you're facing your own difficult family situations.